the casebook of Sherlock Holmes 1927, Episode 9, The Retired Colourman. Welcome back, fellow detectives. After witnessing how gambling desperation drove Sir Robert to desecrate his own sister's remains, you might think you've seen the depths of human moral compromise. But today's case will challenge your ability to distinguish victim from villain in ways that will make you question every assumption you hold about grief and innocence. Have you ever met someone whose suffering seemed so genuine, so heartbreaking, that you never thought to question their story? What if I told you that the most convincing tears can hide the coldest calculations? Prepare yourself for one of Holmes's most psychologically complex cases, where a supposedly wronged husband may be the most dangerous man in London. Picture yourself in the late autumn of 1898, when London's fog rolls thick through the streets and the days grow short and melancholy. You're at 221B Baker Street watching Holmes sort through what appears to be a routine missing persons case, the kind of domestic tragedy that fills police reports but rarely requires the talents of a consulting detective. This is rather pedestrian, Watson, Holmes sighs, tossing the letter aside. Josiah Amberley, a retired paints and varnish manufacturer, reports that his wife has run away with a young doctor named Ray Ernest, taking with them a considerable sum of money and securities. The local police have already investigated and found no leads. Then why is he consulting you? Watson asks, noting his friend's evident lack of enthusiasm. Holmes shrugs. Apparently Sherlock Holmes is his last hope. He's a man of modest means now. The money his wife stole represented his entire savings. He wants them found and prosecuted. Here's where your detective instinct should start whispering warnings. What kind of woman abandons a comfortable retirement to run away with a young doctor? What would drive someone to such a desperate act? Think about the stories we tell ourselves about domestic happiness and the darker realities that might lurk beneath. That afternoon, Josiah Amberley arrives at Baker Street, and you're immediately struck by his appearance of utter devastation. He's a small, elderly man with a fussy manner, dressed in shabby clothes that speak of reduced circumstances. His eyes are red-rimmed from weeping, and his hands tremble as he removes his worn hat. "Mr. Holmes, I am a ruined man," he begins, his voice cracking with emotion. "My wife of 20 years has betrayed me in the most cruel fashion imaginable. She's run off with Dr. Ray Ernest, a man half her age who rented rooms in our house. They've taken £7,000 in cash and securities, everything I worked my entire life to accumulate." Holmes studies this picture of misery with an expression you can't quite read. Is it sympathy or something else? "Tell me about the circumstances of their departure, Mr. Amberley. When did you discover they'd gone?" Amberley dabs at his eyes with a threadbare handkerchief. "3 days ago, I returned from a chess match at my club to find the house empty. My wife had left a note saying she could no longer endure our marriage and was starting a new life with Dr. Ernest. The strong box where I kept our savings had been forced open and emptied." "Did you have any suspicions about their relationship before this?" Watson asks gently. Amberley shakes his head vigorously. "None whatsoever. Dr. Ernest seemed like such a respectable young man. He paid his rent promptly and kept to himself. I trusted him completely, trusted them both. How could I have been so blind?" Notice how convincing his grief appears, detective. The trembling hands, the tears, the self-recrimination, all the hallmarks of a man genuinely devastated by betrayal. But Holmes's next question reveals that he's looking beneath the surface. "This chess match you attended, was it your regular evening engagement?" "Oh, yes," Amberley replies. "Every Wednesday evening at my club. I'm quite devoted to chess. It's been my one pleasure since retiring from business. My wife knew I'd be gone for several hours. An innocent detail or a crucial clue? Consider why Holmes finds this timing so interesting. Holmes agrees to take the case, but something in his manner suggests he's less interested in finding the fugitive lovers than in studying Josiah Amberley himself. Watson, I'd like you to accompany Mr. Amberley back to his home in Lewisham and examine the scene of this domestic disaster. Look for anything that might indicate where they've gone. After Amberley and Watson depart, Holmes does something unusual. He sends you to follow them discreetly and observe everything that happens. Watch Mr. Amberley carefully, he instructs. Note his behavior, his reactions, anything that seems inconsistent with a heartbroken husband. The journey to Lewisham takes you through increasingly shabby neighborhoods until you reach the Haven, a gloomy, isolated house surrounded by high walls and thick shrubbery. The garden is overgrown and neglected, and the house itself has a sinister, brooding quality that makes you uneasy. Amberley leads Watson through the empty rooms, pointing out evidence of hasty departure, clothes scattered, drawers left open, the forced strongbox lying empty on the bedroom floor. You see how they fled in panic, Doctor? They knew I'd discover their betrayal when I returned from my chess match. But you notice something Watson doesn't. A strange smell permeating the house. Not the mustiness of an empty dwelling, but something chemical and acrid that catches in your throat. What could produce such an odor in a supposedly abandoned house? Mr. Amberley, Watson asks, have you checked the outbuildings? Perhaps they left some clue to their destination in the stables or garden shed. Amberley becomes suddenly agitated. There's nothing out there but paint supplies from my old business. I've already searched everywhere. Please, Doctor, let's concentrate on finding where they've gone. His reluctance to let Watson examine the outbuildings strikes you as suspicious. Why would a man desperate for answers refuse any avenue of investigation? You make a mental note to tell Holmes about this detail. Back at Baker Street that evening, Holmes listens intently to your observations. A chemical smell, you say, and he was adamant about not checking the outbuildings. Most interesting. He turns to Watson. What was your impression of our grieving husband? He seemed genuinely distraught, Watson replies. The man is clearly suffering terribly from this betrayal. But Holmes shakes his head slowly. Is he suffering from betrayal, Watson, or from something else entirely? Tell me, did you notice anything about the timeline of events? Here's where Holmes's genius for detail reveals the first crack in Amberley's story. He claims to have been at his chess club on Wednesday evening when the flight occurred, but the note his wife supposedly left was dated Thursday. Why would she write a note the day after she'd already departed? The inconsistency is glaring once pointed out, but you realize how easy it would be to miss such details when confronted with apparent suffering. What other elements of Amberley's story might not withstand scrutiny? Holmes's suspicions deepen when he receives a telegram from his network of informants. No record of Dr. Ray Ernest purchasing train tickets, booking passage on any ship, or withdrawing funds from any London bank. No sightings of him or Mrs. Amberley at any hotel or boarding house in England. They've vanished without a trace, Watson observes. Remarkable. For two people traveling together with a large sum of money, Holmes's expression is grim. Too remarkable, Watson. Two people fleeing together, leave trails, tickets purchased, luggage transported, inquiries made. But Dr. Ernest and Mrs. Amberley have left nothing. It's as if they never existed. The next morning, Holmes makes an unexpected move. He visits Amberley's chess club and speaks with the members. What he discovers sends the investigation in an entirely new direction. Mr. Amberley was indeed at the club on Wednesday evening. He arrived at 7 o'clock and left at midnight, a perfect alibi for the time his wife supposedly fled. Then surely that proves his innocence, you suggest. But Holmes's eyes gleam with dark insight, or it proves his guilt if we're investigating the wrong crime entirely. Watson, I want you to return to the Haven tomorrow with a different purpose. Tell Amberley you'd like to examine the garden more thoroughly. While he's distracted, I'll investigate those outbuildings he was so anxious to keep hidden. The plan springs into action the following afternoon, while Watson engages Amberley in examining the overgrown garden for signs of where the fugitives might have hidden before their flight. Holmes slips unseen toward the locked shed at the property's edge. What Holmes discovers there confirms his darkest suspicions. The shed door is sealed with fresh paint around the edges, an attempt to contain something inside. When he forces the lock and pulls open the door, the chemical smell that washes out is overpowering, coal gas leaking from a disconnected pipe. And there, slumped in the corner of that death chamber, are two bodies in an advanced state of decomposition. Dr. Ray Ernest and Mrs. Amberley had never fled anywhere. They'd been murdered and hidden in this makeshift gas chamber, while Josiah Amberley established his perfect alibi at the chess club. The brilliance and horror of the crime becomes clear. Amberley had killed them on Tuesday evening, sealed their bodies in the gas-filled shed, then gone to his Wednesday chess match to establish that he was away when they fled. The note supposedly from his wife was a forgery. The ransacked house a staged scene. The whole story of betrayal and flight, a carefully constructed fiction. Holmes immediately summons the police, and the investigation that follows reveals the full extent of Amberley's cold-blooded planning. The paint manufacturer had spent weeks preparing his murder chamber, diverting gas pipes and sealing the shed to create a death trap that would preserve the bodies long enough to confuse the time of death. But why commit such an elaborate double murder? The answer lies in the twisted psychology of Josiah Amberley himself. Holmes's investigation reveals that Mrs. Amberley had, indeed, formed an attachment to the young Dr. Ernest, but it was an innocent friendship that her jealous, controlling husband had warped into something sinister in his mind. He couldn't bear the thought of his wife having any life or friendship separate from him. Holmes explains to the assembled police when he saw her laughing with Dr. Ernest over tea one afternoon, his obsessive jealousy transformed that innocent moment into evidence of an affair that existed only in his paranoid imagination. The money supposedly stolen, still in Amberley's possession, hidden in various bank accounts under false names. The whole story of theft was invented to give him a motive for wanting the couple found and prosecuted, a motive that would disguise his real desire to have them declared dead so no one would search for them. But surely someone would have noticed the smell? Watson protests. Holmes shakes his head. That's what the chess club alibi was really for, Watson. If anyone had detected the odor in those first crucial days, Amberley could prove he'd been nowhere near the house when the gas leak occurred. It would have appeared to be a tragic accident. The confrontation with Amberley when the police arrived to arrest him reveals a man utterly different from the weeping victim who first appeared at Baker Street. Gone is the trembling grief, replaced by cold fury that his perfect plan has been penetrated. They were plotting against me, he snarls, all pretense dropped. I heard them laughing together, saw how she looked at him. They were making a fool of me in my own house. I had every right to defend my honor. The delusion runs so deep that he genuinely believes his victims deserved their fate. Holmes's response cuts through this self-justification with surgical precision. You murdered two innocent people because your sick jealousy couldn't tolerate your wife having a friend. There was no affair, no theft, no betrayal, except the betrayal of your victim's trust when you invited them into your gas chamber and sealed the door behind them. The trial that follows becomes a sensation. In the London papers, Josiah Amberley, the weeping widower who had seemed so sympathetic, is revealed as a calculating killer who almost fooled even Sherlock Holmes with his convincing performance of grief. The evidence against him is overwhelming. The bodies in the shed, the forged note, the false financial records. But most damning is Holmes's testimony about the timeline inconsistencies and the suspiciously perfect alibi that actually pointed toward guilt rather than innocence. In his final statement before sentencing, Amberley shows no remorse. I loved my wife and would have given her anything, but she chose to humiliate me with that young doctor. What man wouldn't have done the same in my position? The jury deliberates for less than an hour before returning a verdict of guilty on 2 counts of murder. As the condemned man is led away to await execution, Holmes reflects on the psychological complexities of the case. Josiah Amberley is a study in how jealousy and paranoia can transform an ordinary man into a monster. He created an entire fantasy of betrayal in his mind, then murdered real people to punish them for crimes that never occurred. But how did you first suspect him? Watson asks. His performance of grief seemed so genuine. Holmes smiles slightly. It was too genuine, Watson. Real grief is messy, inconsistent, full of anger and confusion. Amberley's grief was theatrical, perfectly performed, calculated to evoke sympathy. It was the grief of an actor, not a victim. Moreover, Holmes explains, the speed with which Amberley sought to have the couple declared fugitives revealed his true purpose. An actually wronged husband would want to find them and confront them, but Amberley wanted them declared missing and forgotten as quickly as possible. That told me he already knew exactly where they were because he'd put them there himself. So tell me, detective, did you suspect Amberley's grief was an act from the beginning? What warning signs did you notice in his story? And most importantly, how do we guard against being deceived by those who weaponize our sympathy against us? This chilling case reminds us that the most dangerous criminals aren't always those who appear threatening. Sometimes they're the ones who make us feel sorry for them. Josiah Amberley nearly committed the perfect murder by hiding behind a mask of victimhood, knowing that people's natural compassion would blind them to his guilt. The retired Colourman's crime stands as one of Holmes's most unsettling investigations, where the detective had to see past convincing tears to the cold calculation beneath. It teaches us that true detection requires skepticism even toward those who seem to suffer most, because sometimes the greatest performance is one of innocence itself. Join me next time as we investigate The Veiled Lodger, a case where a woman's terrible secret has kept her hidden from the world for years, and only Holmes can finally bring her the justice and peace she desperately needs.